Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming on to this podcast. We're doing a spooky special talking about how we can create horror outside of October. Something that we're seeing a lot of, not just in our industry, but in the wider world, is this need for sort of scary stuff year round. Gone of the days of trying to get into an 18 rated film at the age of 15 in October, because that was the only time that it was on. You can watch scary things year round, especially on Netflix. And before this podcast, I did a little bit of research, and I found that if you look at horror slash thriller content on Netflix, it makes up 3 billion hours of viewed content globally every year on Netflix, with the biggest contributors being Stranger Things and Wednesday. So I guess the first question is we'll start with Matt. What sort of scary stuff are you watching?
I think I'm quite a traditionalist, really, when it comes to scary films. I'm not a fan of the sort of CGI kind of boom that happened in the sort of early noughties around scary films. I'm old school, yeah. It's Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it's The Exorcist, it's Alien, it's those
Blair Witch
films where,
Project.
yeah, essentially where very minimalist. It's what you don't see that scares you the most, and it's the kind of fear of the unknown that sort of scares me and excites me the most, basically.
Cool. Alex.
I have to hold my hands up and say that, like, I am a big scaredy cat. So I don't indulge in a lot of horror. However, what I do like is, you were mentioning on Netflix, is Stranger Things and Wednesday. I love Wednesday. And also I like the Alien Earth series. So I'm watching that at the moment on Disney
Yeah,
Plus.
same here.
But I don't find that, to me, it's not scary. So because it's more kind of so fantasy, it's so futuristic. Things that really scare me is, like, if it could actually happen, if it's based on a true story, or if it has a lot of gore in it where it's actually could possibly happen to me, then I can't. Those things I can't watch. But things like that's so fantasy and so, like, it's never going to happen in my lifetime, that obviously I'm thinking that Alien Earth will actually happen. That's obviously going to happen because we're obviously going to transfer our consciousness into AI robots, and that's how we will live forever as immortals, but not when I'm alive. And therefore that's okay. So yeah, those sort of stuff. I like Starship Troopers as well, which is also really weird. I really enjoy that.
And Andy, what sort of things are you watching?
Very similar to Alex, actually. I'm not really a horror fan, so thank you for having me on this podcast. That'll be a great input. Thank you. But exactly like Alex as well, I'm only on the first, I think, 2 series of Stranger Things, so I'm way behind with that. But I'm a huge fan of Wednesday. But I think probably starting this conversation, it's more to do with Tim Burton, I think, that being his kind of genre that he's owned for so many decades now, and his unique visual style that he's brought to that kind of genre. He's now become the king of the stop motion, that kind of really spooky, angular, sort of black and white, monochromatic world that I really enjoy his things, like, Frank and Weenie, some of the other films he's made. So anything to do with Tim Burton, I will usually give it a watch.
Do you know, I had a look before I joined, because I was like thinking, what is the definition from the Oxford Dictionary of?
We should always start with that, shouldn't we?
Always start with the
Oxford English Dictionary rules. Yeah.
Give me horror. What is it? And it was an intense feeling of fear, shock, or disgust. Children screamed in horror, and I think that's what most of us see as horror. But also, informally, it's a bad or mischievous person. That little horror, example, using it in a sentence. And I kind of feel like that's a really good kind of spectrum of where we can see horror, because especially if it's being implemented by Disney, I'm probably going to talk about Villain's Land, but that's mischievous. It's a mischievous type of horror. It's a bit spooky or spooky kooky, but like, I don't know, I can't think of the word now, Scooby-Doo. But then
Isn't that just what you say when you can't think of the word? Scooby-Doo,
yeah,
just there.
Yeah, Scooby-Doo. It's
Yeah.
a bit Scooby-Doo, but also then you've got the extreme of that, which is things like, I don't know, Blair Witch, or psychological horrors that are or
Like The
if
Conjuring.
we think about Saw as being a horror, or Cabin in the Woods, or those sort of stuff. Yeah, which is absolute fear. I kind of like that. I kind of like seeing horror as a spectrum, because I can certainly identify with the more mischievous and the more kind of spooky horror.
You're definitely right. I think there is a spectrum and it's very subjective in terms of what scares people. I was even thinking about from my kids' perspective, what would be horror to them. Not that
Yeah.
I'd show them slasher films, but
The internet going
things
out.
like the Grinch, the internet going out. Yeah. But no, it's stuff like the Grinch, and for some people, it might even be toy dolls.
Yeah.
Well, I often think without context as well. I think as we get older, we obviously understand certain things. But I remember as a kid, like certain films. You talk about Tim Burton, Andy, Edward Scissorhands. When I was about 4 or 5 years old, I didn't watch the film. I just saw all the promotional material of it, and without any context, it genuinely terrified me.
Yeah.
And it was only when I was obviously older and watched Edward Scissorhands, I was like, oh, it's a romantic
It's a
sort of
fairy tale.
story, essentially. Yeah. Christmas elements attached to it and stuff. And it's like, but without context, it's hard to sort of judge what does actually scare young people.
Edward Scissorhands is now a ballet as well. Like
It is.
Matthew
Yeah,
Bourne
Matthew
has
Bourne did it.
staged a beautiful production
very
of Edward
good.
Scissorhands, and that's amazing because it takes it from the screen where it can be darker and puts it onto the stage where it actually can be enjoyed by a family audience through a completely different medium. So yeah, that's again what I really find interesting about when we explore this kind of spectrum of horror, like, and how it's being implemented. It's very exciting. You can do lots of different things with it.
I'm trying to imagine Edward Scissorhands doing the lifts in the ballet
With his, as he does.
They do go
He
through a lot of
does.
casts. They do go through a lot of
they
casts,
do.
unfortunately.
Many
They're
died.
replacing
And
it
And
with
a lot of costumes as well.
Everything's made
Ripped to
from
shreds.
Kevlar on that show. Yeah, but I think that's what that film does. It's that juxtaposition. I think that's what Tim Burton does. So he plays with that, the fact that kids are told that scissors are dangerous and they're sharp, and he's the softest person. He's this kind of almost childlike, individual, but yet his hands can't do that, and he wants to be able to hold. It's this beautiful juxtaposition, and all of this, to your point as well, Matt. There's always this interplay between a fairy tale and the darkness, and it's all to do with kind of almost like educating kids, isn't it? Like the Grimm's fairy tales were just educational things, like don't go into the dark forest, not because there's a witch, probably because there's a wolf in there or a bear that's going to eat you. But if you tell them that romantic story and that interesting kind of like visual narrative, that's what's going to kind of keep them awake at night. And as long as they don't go in the woods, and that's fine, doesn't matter about the witch that's going to eat you in the in the kind of like the fairy cottage. That doesn't matter. It's about being safe, and so that darkness is almost used as a kind of a safety mechanism as well. So it keeps us in check, I think, and we do want that. We always, it's like with roller coasters we talk about. We push ourselves as individuals, as humans, to go beyond that, to kind of get as close as we can, potentially to death, to see what it's like, but then always have that moment of being reassured.
It's the safe scare element, essentially.
Absolutely.
As long as it's in a safe environment, then we can get the scares that we need for the dopamine and the adrenaline.
Yeah, exactly.
Excellent. So, we've moved on to experiences. So, obviously, horror rides, horror nights have been a fixture of theme parks for the last 10, 15 years. But I guess what we're seeing now is, as we said right at the start, a year-round offering. So, I'll hand over to the absolute experts when it comes to the new ride and zone developments in Andy and Alex, but there have been a lot of new things included. Alex, you started and mentioned earlier about Disney Villains Land.
Yeah, very exciting, and I think that's something that's been in I think on Imagineer's books for a long time to want to produce, and you can certainly even go back to when we were looking at when Animal Kingdom was originally kind of created. They did want to have this mythological dragons theme, and there was going to be a dark indoor coaster or something, which would have been a bit scary. Then subsequently after that, they actually did the Yeti ride, and the Yeti ride is also a little bit scary. So they have toyed with this fear, and even going right back to Haunted Mansion, like that had elements that are, and it's so quirky, that attraction, because you have some playful elements, you also have some quite scary elements, especially when you're going into the crypt. And Disneyland Paris version, you're going backwards, and you literally have like coffins opening beside you and with skeletons coming out of them, but then it's only brief because it switches you back into the bus of the singing bus, and it kind of gets a bit more fun and fancy. But even the phantom in the attraction is creepy. But they've been playing with, Disney's been playing with these fear elements for a long time, and it's really exciting to see they're really embracing the fan love of their villains and putting them a whole new land. Yeah, it's very exciting. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think it's about time they got their own sort of dedicated space rather than just being a piece of
Or wheeled out at
Little
Halloween.
Mermaid or
I've just checked, and actually, it's longer than 15 years ago. The first Universal
25?
Halloween Horror Nights was 1991.
Oh,
Wow.
wow.
So that was initially the 3-night event that it started with, but still, there's lots happening.
It's
Andy,
massively
what was
popular, that, isn't it? Because it's now gone to Vegas, like
Yes.
as a permanent
Yeah.
attraction, which
It's become
just
a
shows
franchise
you,
in its own
yeah.
right, almost, which
Yeah.
is phenomenal, really. Andy, what other things spring to mind when I say horror-based attractions to you?
Well, I think now, to use the other one that Alex drawed upon earlier, I think, was obviously Universal have opened Epic Universe as an amazing new resort in Orlando, and obviously one of the key cornerstone lands of that through the portal into Dark Universe. So Dark Universe being obviously home to all of the Universal monsters, which it's in their kind of like timeline. They're really hugely important, and one of their kind of staple characters, really, the Universal monsters. But obviously, similar to the Disney kind of issue they've had, they haven't really been able to find a proper way to embed them in a generational attraction all year round. So this was the first kind of we've seen from the big two, from Disney and Universal, to kind of put a flag in the ground or a stake in the ground to say we're going to have all year round horror monsters in this land. It will live all year round. And it was definitely a gamble from Universal. I think when it was first announced in the industry wide a few years ago, it sounded like a great idea, but I think a few of us thought, how's that going to happen? How's it going to be in the Florida sun? Obviously, as we all know, guest demographics going to Orlando theme parks are families as well. So it's interesting how do you kind of turn that dial for the attractions and the experiences in that land? How are they going to be? Are they going to be too much? Are they going to be too kind of anodyne and not scary enough? And I think I haven't been able to visit the park yet, but just from seeing fan reactions online and watching YouTube clips as best you can, they seem to have found the perfect mix of things being quite. It's scary and it's frightening, but it doesn't put you to the edge where you feel like you're completely endangered. Because I think they save that for their Universal horror nights. I think that's where they really turn that dial up. But as we've now seen as well, there's now going to be a permanent attraction for that in Las Vegas. So, which is very much it's a different audience to Orlando. It's very much an audience going there it's a more of an adult audience, as we know, but looking for those real thrill events. So there is now, as you said, like a dark universe exists all year round now, all around the world.
And do you think that's going to expand to the new parks that are going to be opening over the next 5 or 6 years in both the UK and the Middle East?
I think it could. Yeah, I don't see why not. I think that obviously now that they've have the data to show it, and looking from some of the news that we've seen at Universal, have even explored potentially having Halloween Horror Nights if the UK park kind of continues in development. So it seems like it's one of the the master planning menus that they now have. They're trying to own that space of horror and the darker side. And obviously, as Alex mentioned, obviously Disney doing that as well. But that's going to be, as we know, a lighter side of that. The villains are going to be much more family orientated. But I can definitely see this as very much a shift, a cultural shift we're having to see darker, scary attractions living all year round, not just at Halloween.
I know the thought that's in everyone's mind, which is, I wonder what the longest walk-through horror show is ever. Well, I can tell you.
Tell us, Robbie. I mean, we all know, but tell everyone on the call. So, yeah.
So it was the Pure Terror Scream Park located near New York, and it was 1,933 meters long.
Wow.
And that was in 2015.
Oh.
That is humongous.
What was the duration of that then? What was like the experience? How long did it last?
I'm not sure. Let's say
3
like
days.
forever.
You had to sleep there. Yeah.
You had to find somewhere to sleep.
People still in there 10 years later. So value for money is fantastic on there. So that's good. Wonderful. Okay. So I guess one of the main reasons for sort of coming together, especially with you, Matt, is we've done a lot between the two of us in terms of looking at a horror-based attraction or a ride in the form of Torchlight as we came to the idea of the name for it. And that's largely based on the AGV technology that you guys possess and have led the industry in. So just give us a little bit of a background about the AGV, what makes it unique, and what makes it perfect to develop some kind of horror stories to go with it.
Well, yeah, essentially the AGV stands for Automated Guided Vehicle, which basically means it's a trackless dark ride. No power cables, no guide wires, and it's a fully omnidirectional sort of self-driving vehicle, basically. It can be fitted with 6, 8 seats and multiple vehicles that will drive through different scenes. But the beauty of it not being on a track means that it's not set to one linear path. So obviously the vehicles can do all sorts of different things, like drive into dead ends, can do choreographed multiple vehicle scenes, can have near miss collisions. And when it comes to sort of thinking about what this ride system can do, we've spent a long time sort of thinking, as Katapult have as well, on how you can fully utilize those capabilities to make an experience that essentially it's, yeah, no one else can really. Obviously, there's a few trackless dark ride manufacturers out there, but our vehicle is the fastest in terms of acceleration. We're even working on solutions that could potentially make it go even faster. But it's that thrill, it's that sort of, yeah, jolt that the acceleration gives you, and the ability to sort of move within spaces that aren't just set to one linear structure, which makes it unique, really. You can even add elements as well, like where guests sort of choose their different destination. So guest interaction or interactivity on board via touchscreen tablets, buttons, guns, etc., can actually affect the experience. So riders can, yeah, choose one path, and there through multiple choice can actually go and deviate down another path, which again allows for sort of different experiences per ride. So guests can get off and realize we actually went down a different path to you. And obviously it just allows for that re-rideability and sort of, yeah, guest experience where, yeah, people will want to go on it time and time again.
Yeah, repeatability is the elixir of the
Yeah.
attraction operator, isn't it? And featured on the BBC recently as well as
Yes.
part of a documentary.
Yeah. So the secret genius of modern life, presented by Professor Hannah Fry. She came to visit us for a feature as part of the purely roller coasters, I think, or
Yes.
how roller coasters are made. Obviously, we don't make roller coasters, but what they were looking at was what's the future? What does the future hold for the industry and for roller coasters and rides? And our lead engineer Sarah spoke to Professor Hannah and obviously talked her through the AGV and its capabilities while sat on an AGV. And it was quite interesting watching it from behind the scenes. We had 2 camera people who were literally sat either side of the vehicle filming, Hannah and Sarah whilst they were talking on board the vehicle, which funnily enough was had graphics on it, which was from another concept, Overdrive, that Katapult and Simworx worked on together as well.
Wonderful. And Alex, obviously it's okay having a ride system, but something that we wanted to do with this, other than create some amazing visuals, was make sure we use the best of the tech available to create the best story. So how did we go about that from our perspective?
Yeah, so I mean, as Matt said, trackless rides aren't new, and there are some great examples out there already. But I guess we were looking for gaps in the market, and we identified this, intense psychological horror experience, which is where Torchlight was born. And after meeting with Simworx, the tech sort of inspired us to explore this theme of pursuit and the idea that from a guest perspective, you're being chased. And the vehicles have this ability to rapidly accelerate, as Matt said. So really lends itself well to that narrative and that story. And then with the vehicle being omnidirectional, we can introduce this feeling of disorientation. So you don't know where you're going to go next, which is also very exciting. Andy probably will talk more about the story, but you're in this spooky national park and the guests are joined in this expedition to search for some missing people. And I think we've worked it so that it encourages repeatability, as we were talking about repeatability as key, because guests want to experience that again once they find out that twist in the ride and the story. Now they know the outcome, perhaps they'll receive a different ride experience in the future. And also tech integration, we collaborated with Logotronics to integrate the interactive element with the torch that illuminates areas of the scenes to reveal things, which would trigger scenic elements to move, like bugs or leaves. And in one particular scene, the torches switch to kind of a black light, and you're in this cave and you see some creepy symbols everywhere. Basically, it just encourages, as I said, repeatability, so you can interact differently on each visit, slightly different experience. And it's not considered a shooting attraction. We play on having that darkness and what you don't see, meaning you don't need to have these rich thematic elements everywhere. Just the darkness is the fear. And it's not just the concept we designed to support this opportunity. We've worked on like brand creation, queue line narrative, pre-show, world building, photo opportunities. And with Simworx, we're able to kind of hone in more on tailoring that experience to make the most of the ride system available. And also from an operator's perspective, like space, ensuring it can be scalable. So it's a modular attraction layout and exploring guest throughput. And the idea being this is sort of like a full turnkey solution that we can provide in a complete backpack, kind of ready to go to an operator, for example. And I thought it was interesting because why would we create a scary horror attraction that is exclusively for adults? But I guess that is that gap. And the age bracket might seem restrictive due to the nature of the story, but the ride system itself, using the Simworx AGV ride vehicle, is accessible. It's very accessible even to kids. It's just the story overlay that we've put on top of it for the horror. But that's, I guess, going back to, looking at your wonderful insights. We use those first to determine our initial creative direction, and Torchlight suits that target audience of gaming or horror enthusiasts. And we were inspired by video games like The Last of Us or Blair Witch, and films like Cabin Fever, Friday the 13th, The Forest. I actually really like The Forest. That's which is strange because I don't really like those things. It's definitely could actually happen. It was 100% based on actual truth in Japan, but I guess it was kind of went more into fantasy and ghosts. So I was like, I can watch that. And other films like Wrong Turn. So it really embraces using that medium of the Simworx ride system. It embraces that active experience, exploratory perspective, rather than just passively watching a film.
And Andy, something that we kind of need to do with an attraction like this, where we want guests to feel like there's something behind them. They have to look over their shoulder. That pre-show, that queue line, and carrying the story through is so important. How do we make sure we do that to get the best effect that we want from the ride?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing is that these types of attractions are best when they're indoors. The fact that, obviously the things that we talked about earlier, but that Matt said with roller coasters are that kind of big hit. You tend to see them. They tend not to be in show boxes. It's about the thrill of doing that. When you do dark rides, obviously the fact it's in the name, they are dark. So it kind of lends itself already to a darker experience because you're controlling the light. So the first thing we have for our guests is that we can control the light, and it's going to be a darker experience. It could be like a twilight. So automatically you can't see into the longer distance. So automatically we have our guests at a point where they're trepidatious walking into this forest. As Alex mentioned, Shadow Pines is our kind of this wonderful vintage aesthetic that we've got. It's kind of very much that American, wild forest. And we start to kind of breadcrumb in the kind of the queue line of newspaper clippings and radio sound effects and things that there's something that's happened. So it's a really nice way to get the guests into a point before they've even got onto they're in a state of kind of heightened anxiety. They see scratches in trees and things, and the light level, we play with the light levels. In fact, that, we're not using standard lighting, we're using kind of found lighting through kind of, you'd see around with police investigations that it casts a very different stark light, and it goes into the very short distance. It doesn't light the sets how we want it. So we're automatically controlling all of their senses from as soon as they enter the show building until they get onto the ride, into the experience. And I even think there'd be a fantastic smell in there. We could have a really nice kind of damp pine kind of smell. So automatically,
love scent. And
you know how I feel about scent.
Yeah.
We're Alex, just the shadow pine scent in the gift shop, kind of damp pine smell. Yeah.
That's going to be a hard sell to make people feel scared that there's something behind them.
Yeah,
and
people will.
And then make them dwell in the shop afterwards.
Yeah.
Is that what we're trying? The doors are locked, clearly. Matt, from your perspective, how important is the story, not just to create a really great guest experience on the ride, but also to maybe push that tech innovation as well for the next ride system that you produce?
Yeah, I think they go hand in hand, really. I think it's very much all of our products are sort of story driven. Obviously, we use a lot of media based attractions. So therefore, there's always that narrative that will just sort of carry you through the experience. But something like this, I think it's vitally important just to sort of keep you on track with sort of the journey that you go on. But I think obviously, like we mentioned before, the ability to tell potentially different stories as part of the same experience. And again, going back to that sort of wanting to go on it to experience Tunnel 3 rather than Tunnel 2, etc. It's having that sort of narrative all the way through that's A, consistent, but B, can deviate into different parts will add to quite a unique experience for visitors.
And Andy, how does that change the creative challenge around having potentially multiple scenarios for a ride? We're not just doing one story, we could be doing one story but with 5 different endings. So how does that change the creative vision and how we'd approach it?
First, it's a nice challenge to have. I think, conversely, if we go back kind of, 30 years ago, a dark ride like this probably would have been on a track, to Matt's point. It would have been a tracked ride thing, and you're moving kind of linear wise through a space. And, obviously, as we mentioned, the Haunted Mansion's a great example of that. You can kind of pitch the ride vehicle, but there's a certain, after the first few sort of moments of that, you understand that the speed is maintained and you kind of settle into it. And it's a nice story, whereas this fantastic AGV from Simworx is much more dynamic. And so from a creative perspective, that opens so many more doors to us and allows it to be, for example, with the story that we currently have, you're in this kind of Jeep vehicle. So you could have tires spinning. So it can be kind of like sliding around, not moving, the sound effects going, but then it can go really, really quickly. So from those 2 moments, guests have no understanding of what's going to happen next. They don't understand how the speed's going to be. They don't understand where they're going to be pointing. Are they going to get stuck? Because we've seen them, they could go down a dead end. So it allows us from a narrative perspective to really delve into all of these fantastic horror tropes that you'd expect. The lights are going to go out. We're going to get stuck. Oh no, the engine's died just when we didn't need it to. Whereas with other kind of mechanisms, you can't have those. You can't draw from that palette. So that's what's so exciting about this particular ride system. And what really lends itself, as we've talked about, to a horror film. I mean, this concept is so, groundbreaking in that sense that there hasn't really been a proper horror film attraction you can step into and experience in this kind of first person way.
And I quite like, obviously, the fact that it's non-IP based was always quite interesting. But certainly, I remember when we first had the discussions, when Katapult first presented the idea to us, immediately everybody just started adopting their own IP to it. Like we've mentioned, obviously, it's like Stranger Things. This is definitely a Blair Witch type of thing. So even though it's non-IP based, everybody just sort of associates their own sort of favorite franchise or genre connected to it. And I do love how it's quite adaptable in that you know the tropes, the sort of, the cues that happen with, these types of films. But it could be easily adopted were an IP to be brought on board, potentially. Absolutely. To say, okay, well, this could work really well as this brand. So the fact that it could work as IP based or as a standalone IP, I think is fantastic, really.
And I guess that's the beauty of media-based rides, in that there can be a quick switch over. Alex, from your very tech background, I imagine that in terms of thematic elements and how you change a ride, if it was to be swapped in or out for an IP, it could be a lot easier to change compared to other rides situations.
Yeah, of course. It's just the media, really, at the end of the day. If there's, as Andy was talking about sound effects in the queue line, the queue line itself is, and the general scene setting is in this forest. A forest is quite adaptable. And as I said, we didn't need these huge thematic elements. We were kind of using the darkness as a friend, really, to kind of focus the guest's attention on smaller, more localized experiences. And so it's quite easy just to overlay the media if we were to want to change that out from our non-IP based current storyline of Torchlight to a more IP driven or focused attraction. It's very, very quick. It's just a switch on the media server, just change the media, and we can pop it in.
You've made that sound so...
No, I know I make it sound really easy.
You make it sound really easy.
The show
to be fair.
programmers out there are going to be like, no, come on.
Switch.
The guys that make them, they have to deal with that.
Matt, what is the one facet of the ride system that has the greatest potential do you think?
It's still for me the acceleration really. I think it's hard to sort of get across really. I think it's 0.3 G at the moment, which
Okay.
is roughly around 3 meters per second, which doesn't sound a lot. And if you're in a car moving like that, that's not fast at all. But when you're on a ride vehicle such as ours, that push and that drive and that acceleration, it's almost roller coaster based really, and you get that sensation, and it's when mixed with the media, when mixed in sort of a ride setting, I think that's the most unique element of it really. And I think sort of it needs to be sort of tried and experienced to fully realize it. Hence we've got the demos in our factory that we're always keen to get people on board. But it's that sensation is second to none in my opinion.
Andy, what else would you use that speed, that acceleration for, other than horror attractions? What springs to mind?
Oh wow, it's definitely it's a chase. It's escaping from an explosion or something. It's getting out before the whole room around you floods or something. It's that sense of and even having it be almost like a roller coaster to engage some of those elements you do get from a roller coaster, like Matt said, is really interesting. The fact you're now bringing speed into these kind of attractions. So, for me, the AGV, the best thing for me is the ability to be able to, have all those dimensions of movement. So like we said, it can go down a dead end, it can back up because it can do the wheel spin, the whole system can move and shimmy around. It doesn't have to be this linear journey. I think that's the biggest draw of this whole system.
Feeling of disorientation, isn't it? Trying to because we feel like we're in a truck. We feel like we're in something that's familiar to us. It's a vehicle that we could drive. However, it's got this mind of its own, and it's doing something that doesn't feel normal to us. And as Matt was saying, it's that intense kind of speed boost. And even though it's 3 meters per second, I'm just thinking about it in my chair. Like, well, in a second, if I went in 3 meters, that's still very fast. But you can make that.
Could
feel
you show us?
more
Could you try that now? So just go down the stairs.
You can also add wind effects to that as well to make it feel like you're going even faster. And then obviously like the onboard audio will you can make it sound like it's revving, or that it just starts feeling you're exposed as well. When you're in a car, you've got a roof over your head and you've got walls either side of you. You're very much contained. When you're outside on a coaster or on the AGV, you are completely exposed over here. So you don't have a seatbelt going over you like you would in a car. So it's a semi-familiar but also unsettling feeling because you're not in control of the situation and you don't know what's going to happen next.
Something that's new for Halloween Horror Nights this year, that it might have been years previous, but there's certainly been a lot more promotion around it, is the Deathly Afraid necklace. I don't know if anyone has seen those, but you can pay for essentially a lanyard. So if you are a real big fan of scare attractions, but you don't want people to jump out at you, you can, if you want to, showcase yourself, and then staff members, actors, actresses won't give you that big scare. Alex, it comes back to that point you were saying right at the start around that spectrum of scare and that spectrum of horror. And actually, it's a really good way to facilitate people that maybe just do not like the hands-on scare experiences that you can do in these Halloween Horror Nights.
It's for that necklace is 100% for me. Like
I was thinking you're the actual candidate for that.
I'd love to try that because I don't put myself into horror mazes because I am a control freak. So anything I can't control in an environment really freaks me out. So to have that on, I'd feel safer. I wouldn't feel so alert, and I'd be able to appreciate things like the thematic element, the actors, the storytelling more, knowing that that nothing's going to jump out at me and scare me. So, and also that's helpful for not just guests who are big scaredy cats like me, but also guests perhaps who are neurodivergent, who don't want that interactivity, but also and want to have their own space, want to have their own personal space, and still want to be part of this experience. I think it's a really, really good idea. I'd like to see that adopted in other horror mazes and scare attractions. I think that's really good.
And that raises a question, Matt. Is that something that we could do as part of the show system? Almost do a light version of the ride in order to provide...
It's just a button, isn't it, Matt?
These buttons are great. Less scare.
Tap your lanyard and then, yeah. But interesting you say that, because I think it was Alex was talking about it before, and there is the potential to have almost a mild experience and a more higher intensity experience. And it's motion profiles. It can be media switching. So basically there is a more timid profile. Maybe volume is turned down. Some of the effects are lessened, but there is the potential really. And it's, not quite as basic as turning a switch, but it's not far off essentially from an operator's perspective. It is just a case of, we do have some guests that have requested the lighter experience, and they can, literally turn it on and they'll enjoy the experience still, but at a more sort of lower level. And that goes for age ranges as well. So obviously if we want to be all inclusive, we want to include as many people as we can on this experience. But if there's a sort of car full of 18 plus, they're going to want the more darker experience than they would, say, a family of 4 sitting on board. So
it's very similar to what they do in a theatre environment as well, isn't it? When you have relaxed performances and you're still, being inclusive in that you're, letting people come in and experience this wonderful show, but in an environment that is more comfortable to them. So that would be a change in the lighting, as you said, or removing some of the aggressive sound effects and keeping the volume levels a little bit lower. Also, sometimes having someone in there to explain the story beforehand to help so people understand what's going to happen during the performance. So I definitely think it's an option that can be explored in attractions as well.
Interesting. And as you said, Alex, theatre performances, cinema screenings, there's a differentiator. I even saw and heard about a art experience. Instead of having a gallery with no noise whatsoever, for a Send score that was visiting, they actually requested ambient music to make it more palatable for their guests. So even dialing up the experience can sometimes be of benefit as well as dialing it down. So that's really interesting. Wonderful. I've got one more question before I let you go. My God, what's that? That was the horror part of the podcast that I've tried to get in for the last half an hour. That's gone.
We had to have a jump scare somewhere, didn't we? Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. That was the best
I'm going to be terrified of that throughout December.
Yeah, that's horrendous.
He's going to scare the crap out of me.
Sorry. If anyone's just listening instead of watching the podcast, they're not going to realise that I've thrusted
a severed head,
an elf
decapitated
into the camera. So if you are just listening, I'm sorry for making you randomly scared. We'll end with, what's the scariest ride you've been on? Go for it, Matt.
Has anyone been, or did anyone go on the extraterrestrial?
Yes, Alien Encounter
at Magic Kingdom?
I did, and I might have to join you with the scariest one on that one when I was a kid. Go for it. Yep.
Honestly, I think I was 11 years old, probably too young to go on the ride, and it messed me up. Honestly, I remember on holiday for the next couple of days, genuinely walking around thinking, how did they do that? Well, and it's ever since, probably years ago, I think I was still working at Simworx. So obviously it's had a keen interest, and I was watching behind the scenes, watching how they do it. And later on thinking, that's genius. Because I think obviously it's still Disney budgets. So it was very highly themed and that, but so much goes on in the dark.
Yeah.
That a lot of it is was just essentially just turning off the lights and having the odd strobe effect with, lots of 4D effects like neck blasts and sort of subwoofers going off in your head. And it just absolutely scared the hell out of me. And obviously it closed down sort of not long after. Was it like the early noughties, I think, because people were just too scared of it. It was quite a Disney type of ride, but it was
a great shout, Matt. That one. It opened in, I think, 1994, and the amazing thing about it was a real kind of tour de force of binaural audio. So essentially, And for those of you who can see it, Alex and I were doing this on our shoulders because I remember as a kid, it would have these kind of purple rubber shoulder restraints would come down and find your sort of center of your inner ear. And obviously the beauty of that was, to Matt's point, the lights would go out, but you'd hear this alien behind you kind of breathing. And it was terrifying because it plays with what you can't see and the fact that the audio traveled around, so it's moving. So it was a real tour de force, but as you said, it was quite scary, but you know, an amazing attraction. For those of you who got to enjoy it and experience it, it was incredible. And the pre-show was great because it was all about, as I remember, it was like about teleportation. So you see this alien and it's like, and of course, great things about any creative that we always do, but something goes terribly wrong, you know? And so this teleportation, I hope the alien doesn't get out from this tube, and it did. And so even the pre-show was fantastic about setting you up for that. And you're sitting in this theatre and watching this demonstration that went wrong. But yeah.
Maybe.
But it very much for a castle park, it was a really bold move to put that into Tomorrowland and do that. And so, as you said, there must have been so many guests who were just terrified, Matt and myself, including Alex, going, what have I just experienced? My kid's going to have nightmares for weeks.
The screams as well. Whether they were sort of added sound effects or just genuinely in audience members screaming for that. Some experience.
Brilliant. Well, thank you guys for coming onto the podcast. I think the last thing to say is happy Halloween if you do celebrate it, means this is going out in October. And also, both Katapult and Simworx are going to be at IAPA Orlando. Matt, you're going, aren't you?
Yes, yeah. We'll be in
fantastic. And myself and Alex.
Yes.
Are going as well, alongside a few other team members. So any inspiration you want for AGV Dark Ride, or if you're interested in Torchlight, come to see us. If you want to talk about our suggestions of the most scary rides that you've been to, then you know where to find us. But guys, thank you so much for joining, and we'll speak to you all soon.
Thanks very much for being here.
It's been so much fun
for having me, guys. Cheers.
Come on.